I've been around this industry long enough to recognize the moments when the ground really moves. And make no mistake, 2026 was one of those moments. For generations, American gun owners have lived under the weight of federal control, buried in forms, taxed for exercising rights, and stuck inside regulations that often made innovation feel like a legal hazard. But in 2026, that pressure finally broke. This was not a minor adjustment or a routine policy change. It was a major rollback of rules that have shaped gun ownership since the Great Depression. Suppressors, short-barreled rifles, AR pistols, and other gear that spent decades trapped under layers of bureaucracy suddenly moved back into the open. In this breakdown, we're looking at how 2026 changed American gun law and why these reforms may be remembered as one of the biggest firearms shifts in modern history. To understand why 2026 matters so much, we have to go back to 1934. America was coming out of the gangster era, with bootleggers, bank robbers, and Thompson submachine guns dominating headlines. Politicians decided the answer to violence was not simply punishing criminals, but restricting the tools themselves. That is how the National Firearms Act was born. The NFA placed heavy taxes and registration requirements on items like suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and automatic weapons. That $200 tax may not sound shocking today, but in 1934 it represented thousands of dollars in modern value. For most Americans, it effectively priced ownership out of reach unless you had deep pockets or serious determination. For the average gun owner, the NFA did more than regulate firearms. It built a financial and bureaucratic wall around them. It made firearm innovation harder, turned simple ownership into a paperwork maze, and forced enthusiasts to become experts in forms, stamps, and federal procedure. For nearly a century, that framework stayed in place. Details changed here and there, but the foundation remained intact until now. The shift began quietly. Many people barely noticed when the Department of Justice under President Trump stopped defending Biden's 2023 pistol brace rule. That rule had effectively turned millions of ordinary gun owners into potential felons overnight by treating braced AR pistols as short-barreled rifles. In mid-2026, Trump's DOJ withdrew its appeal of a major court ruling. That left the Fifth Circuit's decision in place, and that decision struck down the brace rule nationwide. With one move, millions of gun owners were no longer trapped under that threat. Braced AR pistols, previously treated as illegal SBRs under the rule, were legal again across the country. For a lot of people, it felt like a weight had finally come off their shoulders. Gun forums lit up, dealers began restocking, and for the first time in years, builders and buyers could make choices without constantly worrying about an unclear legal line moving under their feet. There is still some uncertainty about how the ATF will treat firearms registered during the so-called amnesty period. But the bigger picture is clear. Braced pistols are back, and the fear surrounding them has been sharply reduced. Then came a change almost nobody expected. Since 1934, buying a suppressor or silencer under federal law meant paying a $200 tax stamp. That tax was never really about funding government. It was designed to discourage ownership, especially for an item many shooters use to protect hearing and reduce noise. For decades, that extra cost kept casual shooters away. A person might already be paying $700 for a suppressor, then face another $200 in months of waiting on top of it. For many people, that was enough to walk away. In July 2026, that changed. President Trump signed a tax reform bill eliminating the NFA transfer tax on suppressors and short-barreled rifles, effective January 1, 2026. The registration process still remains, including background checks, fingerprints, and the rest of the federal procedure. But the financial barrier is gone. For gun owners, this was not only about saving $200, it was about principle. For years, advocates argued that suppressors reduce hearing damage and noise pollution, making shooting safer and more responsible. For the first time since the 1930s, the federal government finally stepped back from that tax barrier. Not everyone supported the change. Gun control groups warned that easier suppressor access could increase crime. But supporters point data and examples from parts of Europe where suppressors are far more normal and in some countries sold over the counter. In the American gun community, this is being treated as a once-in-a-century win for common sense. The suppressor tax was not the only tax to fall. The same reform also removed the tax on short-barreled rifles, one of the most popular and most misunderstood firearm categories in the country. An SBR gives shooters rifle-like accuracy and control in a compact package. That makes it useful for home defense, close-quarters training, and law enforcement applications. But for decades, the $200 tax and long approval delays kept SBRs out of reach for many ordinary gun owners. That era has now changed. Starting in 2026, shooters can build or buy an SBR without paying the federal tax. That opens the door for a surge in personal defense weapons and pistol-caliber carbines, compact platforms built around speed control and practical power. Think about guns like the CZ Scorpion Evo B&T APC-9 or MP5 clones being configured the way they were originally meant to be, without the same legal gray areas or months of waiting on paperwork. Manufacturers are already preparing for increased demand. Small shops and custom builders, once boxed in by red tape, suddenly have more room to experiment. The new ATF classification board is also meant to make rulings more consistent. No more constantly changing letters that redefine a firearm category overnight. For the first time in decades, the rulebook appears more stable, at least for the moment. For gun owners, builders, and manufacturers, this is a creative reset for designs that were effectively locked away by law for generations. Few recent fights created more heat than the battle over forced reset triggers, commonly called FRTs. The ATF previously treated them as machine guns, which led to raids, confiscations, and lawsuits that shook the firearms world. In May 2026, that situation changed. Trump's DOJ reached a settlement requiring the ATF to stop classifying FRTs as machine guns and to return seized triggers to owners involved in the lawsuits. That single decision reopened the door to one of the most debated firearm technologies in recent memory. Now, this does not mean every trigger model is automatically covered. It also does not override state-level bans in places like California and New York. But at the federal level, FRTs are back in play. For companies like Rare Breed and the customers who supported them, it was a major vindication. It showed that pushing back against enforcement overreach can matter. For everyday shooters, the FRT fight became about more than a trigger. It became a reminder that federal positions can be challenged and in some cases reversed. For years, crossing state lines with certain NFA items was a bureaucratic headache. If you wanted to take a registered SBR or suppressor to a class, match, or training event, you had to file ATF Form 5320.20, wait for approval, and hope the paperwork came back before your trip. If approval did not arrive in time, you were stuck. Starting in 2026, that system is gone. Instead of asking permission in advance, owners now file a notice and can travel. It may sound like a small change, but the impact is substantial. It recognizes that law-abiding gun owners should not have to ask federal permission simply to cross a state line with property they already legally own. When you put it all together, the collapse of the brace rule, the elimination of suppressor and SBR taxes, the return of FRTs at the federal level, and the travel reform, you are looking at the largest rollback of federal gun restrictions since 1934. And the story is not finished. The ATF's new classification panel is supposed to bring consistency and fairness to a system that has long felt arbitrary. Whether it succeeds will depend on who controls it, how it is managed, and how politics influences it over the coming years. Critics argue these reforms weaken the NFA and could increase gun violence. Supporters argue they restore trust, freedom, and fairness for responsible Americans. Either way, the debate is far from over. The 2026 rollback is not only about firearms. It is about the ongoing balance between freedom and government control. For almost a century, the NFA stood as a symbol of federal overreach, punishing innovation and forcing compliance through cost, confusion, and paperwork. Now, that structure is beginning to crack. American firearms culture is entering a new chapter, where decades of frustration are turning into opportunity. Whether this momentum lasts will depend on the courts, Congress, and most importantly, the people. But one thing is clear, no matter where you stand on the issue, 2026 changed the rules forever. Stay smart, stay safe, and keep your powder dry.